This has always been one of my favorite Metallica songs. Probably my favorite on the Master of Puppets album. And this riff is probably the best riff on this song, in my opinion. It is the bridge from Damaged Incorporated off of the Master of Puppets album. And I listened to this album religiously as a teenager. And I just never learned this riff, I think because it was so intimidating. And like most metal guitarists over the age of 25, I grew up listening to Metallica. And I grew up worshiping James Hetfield and his ability to write the greatest riffs of all time. Could definitely be considered the riff master of all time. But this riff was so intimidating. It was so fast. I was always so scared to learn it, but I finally learned it a couple weeks ago, and I just wanted to break this riff down and just show you guys how I approached it and how I learned it section by section. So let's talk about it. So this riff is pretty difficult, especially if you're a newer guitarist, you don't have a lot of experience. There are several techniques and transitions in this riff that need special attention. So that's exactly what we're going to talk about today, and I'm going to show you exactly how to provide special attention to every single small transition and idea. And then at the end I will have exercises specifically for each of these ideas that we discuss in this video. First of all, the tuning is E standard, like most Metallica songs you come across. E, A, D, G, B, E. And as far as tone goes, I was never somebody that was trying to capture the exact same tone. I just tried to find a good sound that I liked, and I played everything that way. But if you guys want to try to match their tone, scoop the mids all the way down with the mids, really high with the treble, bass, and then a lot of gain as well. James Hetfield has active EMG pickups, his signature pickups, I believe, which are the same ones as I have in this guitar. Riffs like this, to where you're going to be playing back and forth between the bottom three strings. Generally, the best way to hold the pick, especially for the riffing and the rhythm style, is going to be maybe like a 1/2 inch to 1/3 inch of your pick sticking out, more perpendicular to your hand versus like straight up and down. And the reason why is because you're going to need to palm mute. You want to have a slight left angle so that you're picking on this edge right here versus flat like that. That is going to minimize the friction between the pick and the strings. And you also want to have it angled slightly down, and that is also going to minimize friction. That's just the way that works best for me, and that's the way that I think works best for a majority of people. But if you find your own way, everybody's a little bit different. Your wrist is not going to be the same as mine. Your hand is not going to be the same as mine. If you find a better way to do it, feel free to do it that way. For pretty much any metal riff, you're going to need to be able to palm mute and take your palm off. So you don't want your palm to be too far away from the strings. So just keep that in mind. So getting into the riff, the first idea that you want to focus on is the 2-string gallop. And that's really what makes this riff the riff that it is. And that's why we're going to focus on it first, because I think it's probably the most difficult part about this riff, and it's really what makes this riff so appealing. We're going to be galloping between the bottom 2 strings. You're going to be playing 2 notes on the A string, 2 notes on the A string, 1 note on the E string. The most effective way to do this is down, up, and then down. So if you don't know what the gallop is, it's basically 3 16th notes with a rest, or 2 16th notes and an 8th note. So it sounds like a horse running, pretty much, is the idea. And the most effective way to pick that is going to be down, up, down. So if you're used to the single note gallop, then you're probably not used to picking your pickup high enough to get to the next string. So you just need to practice that. So just practice that 2-string gallop a bunch of times until you get it to where it's pretty easy, because you're going to need to be efficient at that 2-string gallop before you move on and actually learn the riff and actually play the entire riff. And honestly, if you do it for like 10 minutes straight, you're probably going to have it. So as far as what notes are palm muted in this entire riff, it's going to be the gallop. All the gallops are palm muted, and then all the open notes on the bottom string. So the second idea is going to be the A string melody that takes up a large part of the riff, and it looks like this. So practice that a bunch of times without any gallops, without any notes in between. And you can even land on the 6th fret of the bottom string, because that's where you're going to have to land. And again, I have some more interesting exercises that cover all this stuff. So next, we want to look at the first power chord transition because that can be a little tricky. Personally, I don't like to move my hands around or my fingers around more than necessary, so you can see there how I used my middle finger and my pinky for that power chord, which is not as common, but that just means that I don't have to move this finger over here or whatever. I don't have to move my fingers amongst the frets, just the strings. So if you want to do it a different way and use like your first and third or first and fourth fingers, have at it. But that's the way that I do it, and that's the way that I would recommend you do it. Not quite sure how James does it. To me, that seems like the most efficient way. So practice something like that, just the last two notes into that power chord. So that's most of the riff right there. But then after the third time of that, there's a tail, which is slightly different. So let's look at that now. So the first section of that tail is the double string gallop off the 7th fret like we've been doing, and then 3rd fret, and then open bottom string. I did find it as difficult to go from the gallop to the 3rd fret, but then doing that open right after was kind of challenging for me, so I just practiced. Let's practice that a bunch of times and got it figured out pretty quickly, just like you will. You can also practice it without the gallop first if that's helpful. And the last section is the second power chord transition, the transition into the second power chord. And I practiced that entire melody of the tail going into that power chord. And then you can also throw the gallops in. There is the gallop on the 7th fret, and there's the gallop on the 5th fret as well. So at this point, you're pretty much ready to put the entire riff all together, and this is what it should sound like. Honestly, like most riffs, take me about 30 minutes to get figured out, learn, be able to play pretty well. This one took me like an hour. So it is a more complicated riff, at least for me. Let me know what you guys think. Maybe it's a little bit easier for you. But yeah, it's a fun riff. I encourage you guys to learn it. If you watch this entire video to this point, I hope that you are going to spend the time to learn it, because this was a lot of time wasted for nothing. You just spent all this time watching this video of me explaining how to play this song, so you better learn it.